The most precious truth. Prawl, Death's Tomb. From chapter 10 of Galaxy in Flames by Ben Kunter, the third book in the Heresy series. Enjoy! The subdeck was packed with people come to hear the words of the saint's apostle. Apostle. That's what they called him now, thought Cinderman. And it gave him comfort to know that even in these turbulent times, he was still a person others looked up to. Vanity, he knew, but still, one takes what one can when circumstances change beyond one's control. Word had spread quickly through the vengeful spirit that he was to speak, and he glanced nervously around the edges of the subdeck for any sign that word had reached beyond the civilians and remembrancers. Armed guards protected the approaches to the subdeck, but he knew that if the Astartes or Magard and his soldiers came in force, then not all of them would escape alive. They were taking a terrible risk. But Euphrates had made it very clear that he needed to speak to the masses, to spread the word of the emperor, and to tell of the imminent treachery that she had seen. Thousands of people stared expectantly at him as he cleared his throat, glancing over his shoulder to where Mercedes and Euphrates watched him, standing at the lectern raised on a makeshift platform of packing crates. A portable vox link had been rigged up to carry his words to the very back of the subdeck, though he knew his iterator-trained voice could be heard without any mechanical help. The vox link was there to carry his words to those who could not attend this gathering, fateful among the technical staff of the ship, having spliced the portable unit into the ship's principal voxcaster network. Cinderman's words would be heard throughout the expedition fleet. He smiled down at the crowd and took a sip of water from the glass beside him. A sea of expectant faces stared back at him, desperate to hear his words of wisdom. What would he tell them? He wondered. He looked down at the scribbled notes he had taken over time as he had been sequestered in the bowels of the ship. He looked back over his shoulder at Euphrates, and her smile lifted his heart. He turned back to his notes, the words seeming trite and contrived. He screwed up the paper into a ball and dropped it by his side, feeling Euphrates' approval like a tonic in his veins. The War Master has betrayed the Emperor, he said, pausing to allow the inevitable howls of denial and outrage to fill the chamber. Shouted voices rose and fell like waves on the sea, and Cinderman let them wash over him, knowing the exact moment when he should speak. I know, he said. You think such a thing is unthinkable, and only a short time ago, I would have agreed. But it is true. I have seen it with my own eyes. The saint showed me her vision, and it chilled my very soul to see it. War tilled fields of the dead, winds that carry a cruel dust of bone, and the sky turned eyes of men who saw wonders and only dreamed of their children and friendship. I tasted the air, and it was heavy with blood. My friends, its stink reeking on the bodies of men we have learned to call the enemy. And for what? That they decided that they did not want to be part of our warmongering imperium? Perhaps they saw more than we. Perhaps it takes fresh eyes of an outsider to see what we have become blind to. The crowd quieted, but he could see that most people still thought him mad. Many were here, the faithful, but many others were not. While almost all of them could embrace the emperor as divine, few of them could countenance the war master betraying such a wondrous being. When we embarked on this so called Great Crusade, it was to bring enlightenment and reason to the galaxy. And for a time, that's what we did. But look at us now, my friends. When was the last time we approached a world with anything but murder in our hearts? We bring so many forms of warfare with us, the tension of sieges and the battlefield of trenches soaked in mud and misery while the sky is ripped with gunfire. And the men who lead us are no better. What do we expect from cultures who are met by men named War Master and Widowmaker and the Twisted? They see the Astartes clad in their insect carapaces and plate of armor, marching to the grim sound of cocking bolters and roaring chainswords. What culture would not try to resist us? Sunderman could feel the crowd's mood shifting, and he knew he had stoked their interest. Now he had to hook their emotions. Look what we leave behind us. So many memorials to our slaughters. Look to the Lupercal's court, where we house the bloody weapons of war in bright halls and wonder at their cruel beauty as they hang waiting for their time to come again. We look at these weapons as curios, but we forget the actuality of the lives these savage instruments took. The dead cannot speak to us. They cannot plead with us to seek peace while the remembrance of them fades and they are forgotten. Despite the ranks of graves, the triumphal arches, and the eternal flames, we forget them. For we are afraid to look at what they did, lest we see it in ourselves. Sunderman felt a wondrous energy filling him as he spoke, the words flowing from him in an unstoppable torrent, each word seeming to spring from his lips of its own volition, as though each one came from somewhere else, somewhere more eloquent than his poor mortal talent could ever reach. We have made war in the stars for 2 centuries. Yet, there are so many lessons we have never learned. The dead should be our teachers, for they are the true witness. Only they know the horror and the ever-repeating failure that is war. The sickness we return to generation after generation because we fail to hear the testament of those who sacrificed martial pride, greed, or twisted ideology. Thunderous applause spread from the people directly in front of Sunderman, spreading rapidly through the chamber, and he wondered if such scenes were being repeated on any of the other ships of the fleet who could hear his words. Tears sprang to his eyes as he spoke, his hands gripping the lectern tightly. His voice trembled with emotion. Let the battlefield dead, take our hands in theirs and illuminate us with the most precious truth we can ever learn. There must be peace instead of war. Let's move forward. Cleansing. Let the galaxy burn. God machine. You see now, said Horus to the assembled remembrancers. This is war. This is cruelty and death. This is what we do for you, and yet you turn your face from it. Weeping men and women clung to one another in the wake of such monstrous genocide, unable to comprehend the scale of the slaughter they had just been enacted in the name of the Imperium. You have come to my ship to chronicle the Great Crusade, and there is much to be said for what you have achieved. But things change, and times move on, continued Horus, as the Astartes warriors along the flanks of the chamber closed the doors and stood before them with their bolters held across their chest. The Great Crusade is over, said Horus, his voice booming with strength and power. The ideals it once stood for are dead, and all we have fought for has been a lie. Until now. Now I will bring the crusade back to its rightful path and rescue the galaxy from its abandonment at the hands of the Emperor. Astonished gasp and wails spread around the chamber at Horus's words, and he relished in the freedom he felt in saying them aloud. The need for secrecy and misdirection was no more. Now he could unveil the grandeur of his designs for the galaxy and cast aside his false facade to reveal his true purpose. You cry out, but mere mortals cannot hope to comprehend the scale of my plans, said Horus, savoring the looks of panic that began to spread around the audience chamber. No iterator could have ever had a crowd so completely in the palm of his hand. Unfortunately, this means there is no place for the likes of you in this new crusade. I am to embark on the greatest war ever unleashed on the galaxy. I cannot be swayed from my course by those who harbor disloyalty. Horus smiled, the kind of smile of an angelic executioner. Kill them all, he said. All of them. Bolter fire stabbed into the crowd as the War Master's order. Flesh burst into wet explosions, and 100 bodies fell from the first fusillade. The screaming began as the crowd surged away from the Astartes, who marched into their midst, but there was no escape. Guns blazed and roaring chainswords rose and fell. The slaughter took less than a minute, and Horus turned away from the killing to watch the final death throes of Istvan III. Abaddon emerged from the shadows, where he and Malagurst had watched the slaughter of the Remembrancers. My lord, said Abaddon, bowing low. What is it, my son? Ship surveyors report that the virus has mostly burned out. And the gaseous levels? Off the scale, my lord, smiled Abaddon. The gunners await your orders. Horus watched the swirling, noxious clouds enveloping the planet below. All it would take was a single spark. He imagined the planet as the frayed end of a fuse that would ignite the galaxy in a searing conflagration and would lead to an inexorable conclusion on Terra. "Order the guns to fire," said Horus, his voice cold. "Let the galaxy burn." I swear, the Warhammer series was totally written for Halloween. Like it's the perfect series to be reading right now, and I'm kind of enjoying it. And it seems that the more of these I do, the more I show up in the algorithm. So contest is still going. Subscribe, 500 across the YouTube, Instagram, and what's the other one? Twitter. Not that I care much about that one. US address, nerdy prizes shall be had. 3 nerdy prizes to represent my 3 platforms. For all of you who have subscribed, thank you. This past week since I started doing these readings, like subscriber count and watch count is going way up, and that doesn't happen without you. I'm having fun. I hope you're having fun. Hey, what better for Halloween time than stories of, blood, death, and gore? Because but also great lessons to be learned from the Warhammers. I hope you heard some of that. So I'll see y'all in the next one. I'm going to do a couple more of these. I'm probably going to go a little bit more into maybe Fulgrim. And there's a little bit more I want to do out of the Angelic Exterminatus because it's so Halloweeny, and maybe even Nemesis. So there's just so much. And I might not stop this with Halloween. There's so much. But I'm never going to read a whole book because who doesn't want to get slapped by the Black Library is me. I'm your friend, Black Library. I love Warhammer. Snippets, snippets, snippets. Go read the rest of the book. Tell me what you think down below. Bye.